これはこうだからこれはこう読むみたいな。表面上でなんか認識してるだけな気がする。
Welcome to the lazyfluency podcast, where we have casual conversations switching between English and Japanese so that you can learn from and with us along the way. I'm Joey.
And I'm Miami.
And the topic of the day is language learning apps. Before we get into that, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and drop a review on the platform you're listening on. We appreciate the support. And with that out of the way, language learning apps. Around this time of year, many people all around the world decide to learn a new language or take their language learning more seriously. If you are listening to this podcast, then this may be you. In order to accomplish this goal, you might have downloaded a language learning app, but will that actually help you reach your goal? This week we're talking about language learning apps, mainly because of what I said. A lot of people sent them. I think language learning is a resolution, and there are a whole bunch of language learning apps, and recently I feel like there's like a renaissance of AI language learning apps, which we'll talk about a little later. But Ayami, do you have any experience using any sort of language learning apps for English?
なんて言うんだろう、クイズ系なのはやったことないけど、まあ、Hello Talk で、まあ、Language Exchange App なんだけど、それかな?
That's it?
I guess.
Okay. Well, for me, on the other hand, I've had...
待って、暗記、あと。
Oh, Anki, yes, space repetition app. I believe one of the most popular ones just ever is Duolingo as well. First, I kind of want to segment the different kinds of apps there are into different categories so we can talk about them in a little more detail. So the first category I put was support. So apps that are meant to basically be used alongside language learning as opposed to being like a central tool for language learning. This could be something like a textbook or grammar resource, or something, questions for like a test. I know for Japanese it was JLPT. The next thing I have is memorization, so like space repetition based apps, Anki being a famous one of those. And then dictionary I put as its own category. And then there's all-in-one apps. We'll talk about Duolingo. I think it falls in this category as well as some other ones, as well as language exchange. And then finally, like the AI apps. You said, what was the one you said you had experience using again?
Hello Talk と、なんだっけ、暗記。
So your language learning, you basically never used anything that's similar to Duolingo.
いや、なんかそもそも私が、まあ、英語を勉強し始めた時期っていうか、きっかけは、普通に日本の学校でみんなやるから、そこから始めて、で、学校で結構なんかその単語ボキャブラリーテストとか普通になんかレギュラーにあったから、なんか単語帳みたいなのあって、なんて言うんだろう。受験で、大学受験とかでよく出る、ハイイールドの6000単語とか、6000もいかないか。なんとか何千単語の、文を収録したなんか単語帳みたいなのあるんだけど、それを使って、で、学校でテストがあったね。でもそのテストがなんかすごく、なんかバカらしくて、なんかエピソードなんかめちゃめちゃ前の方、3とか3ではないか。けど、めちゃ前のところで言ったかもしれないけど、その学校でやる英単語テストっていうのが、なんかもう1対1対応で、なんか、なんて言うんだろう。その英単語帳に載ってる例文を、使って、なんか、どっかしらを、なんか、穴埋めにして、そこを、なんか、何の言葉が入るでしょう、みたいな。なんか、そういう感じで、なんか、全然実践的じゃないのね。なんか、わかるじゃん。なんか、例えば、ケーキを食べるでさ、食べるのところがカッコになってるのね。I something, cakes みたいな書いてあって、で、絶対、わかるじゃん、入るやつ。なんていうの、いいとぐらい簡単な単語じゃないんだけど、でもさ、大体違うなとかってわかるじゃん。その単語の意味さえ知ってれば。だから結構なんか単語知ってても、日本人が英語喋れないっていうのは、なんかそういう感じのなんかテストをやってるかな、みたいな思う。
That is similar to something like, one part of Duolingo. Duolingo's evolved a lot. And maybe we should just talk about it first because I think it's one of the most popular ones. And maybe people who listen to this, some people are using Duolingo. Although if you can understand, I am speaking, I feel like and using Duolingo, then good job. That's impressive.
なんかね、なんか聞いた話、私デュオリンゴ、使ったことないんだけど、デュオリンゴをやってるなんか人の話聞くと、なんかゲーム感覚でできて、しかも毎日多分十何分とか10分20分ちょっとだけやるだけでなんか結構成長していくみたいな感じで、でもなんかなんて言うんだろう、クイズ系だから言語学習の結構上級者とかにはあんま向かないのかな。ただこの言葉の意味は何でしょうみたいなので、しかもその出てくる言葉があまり難しくないから初心者には多分いいのかな。
I guess we're talking about ups and downsides, I guess, of Duolingo. Let's start, I guess, kind of that's where you're segmenting in. Well, first I'll say I've met plenty of people who've learned and tutored people who've been learning or started learning Japanese or even currently learns Japanese with Duolingo upwards of 2 years. This discussion isn't a discussion about effectiveness for many reasons. Duolingo and many all-in-one app-based approaches like Duolingo are not the fastest way you can go about learning a language, but I'm more concerned about getting, is the person, whoever's learning the language, what are they getting from it, and or what do they want, and if they're getting what they want from it. And I feel like, the one positive of Duolingo or any of those all-in-one apps to try to get you to learn a language is the consistency. And a lot of them use the kind of how addicting a phone is, which can be a bad thing. But for language learning, I think the everyday forced consistency is actually a good thing. As for the structure of Duolingo, just so you have a slightly better idea, it's not just quiz-based as you get over higher levels. And this has evolved over time. But there's a speaking recognition portion. There's a bunch of different types of, both the fill in the blank that you talked about. But I believe they also add rearranging sentences and things like that to Duolingo. Yeah. But go ahead.
なんかもう一つのアプリじゃないけど、なんか買ったな。なんか実物のなんかソフトウェアなのかなみたいなの買って、なんかロゼッタストーンってやつなんだけど知ってる？
Yeah, that is a very old iconic language learning app.
で、なんだっけな、中学2年か3年ぐらいに、my dad が買ってくれて、それをやってたね。で、それが、なんか、発音するじゃん。発音して、なんかどれぐらい、合ってるかっていうのを、出してくれるんだけど、文とか単語読んで、80% 合ってるとか、95% 合ってるとか。なんかそれ今、普通の、携帯のアプリでもあるじゃん。エルサなんとかみたいなやつ。確か。
I don't know anything about an Elsa one, but that sounds fun. That sounds like a karaoke. I know there are some apps that...
それ AI なの。
Yeah, there are some, there are new ones that have, the AI telling you how good your pronunciation is. But I do want to go into one of my first problem here for people who are using Duolingo and wondering, especially why so many people might be critical of Duolingo. And I think a lot of people are critical of many apps. Let's just start with the Duolingo types for their efficiency. And maybe somebody might be wondering, what is inefficient about Duolingo? Well, a large portion of this, and I think this is kind of something that I want to talk about Anki, that I have things I'm critical about Anki and how it can be used by, some people, is that Duolingo can make you feel as if you're doing much more than you are, where if you weren't otherwise using Duolingo and you set any other daily goal, for example, reading a certain, it depends what level you are. If you're a beginning learner, I think Duolingo is probably at its strongest, especially when it can help you, especially with Japanese, help you learn hiragana or katakana. But after that point, especially when you get beginner intermediate stage, Duolingo can really make you feel like you're getting daily engagement with Japanese, and so that you're satisfied. Whereas if you chose any other way of engaging with Japanese, like listening to more, podcasts or reading actual content or engaging with anything along those lines, you actually would be learning a lot more. I'm not even going to compare Duolingo to something like, using Anki, because I think it's kind of a different category. But I think for me, one of the biggest criticisms I have with Duolingo, and I notice with people using it, aside from, inaccuracies or unnatural things, because I don't think that's my biggest criticism with Duolingo. I just believe that Duolingo makes people overly complacent. Complacent means like they feel like fine and comfortable, and feel there's like a sense that they're completing a lot more than they are. And I'm not saying that's entirely a bad thing, because I don't want people to feel bad about the language learning, but I feel like it can trick people. Even though people always shit on Duolingo and said how bad it is, I still meet so many people who it's just really easy to start in, which is great. That's a positive. But then at the same time, people get really stuck and attached to Duolingo because of almost like cocaine, like addiction to it. And if you're going to get addicted to that, like there's so much stuff that you'd learn way more, and it would be honestly more enjoyable than getting addicted to Duolingo specifically, which, like as we said, efficiency is not king. But if you're going to get addicted to something, I would prefer something that you're actually learning. I've had many students that I've tutored who've used Duolingo for 2+3 years, and they're still struggling reading hiragana. And I'm not like judging anybody's language journey, but that's like taking 3 years to learn the alphabet in English. And
デュオリンゴってさ、だってそのひらがなの読み方もだってクイズでやるんじゃないの？あれ単語だけってこと？
No, you do. It does teach you hiragana, katakana.
じゃあなんでだって2年間もやってたらさ、わかるくない？
No, it's because it's not that they haven't been introduced to hiragana and katakana. It's that they don't get enough exposure to reading content, like reading content that they actually are able to comfortably read hiragana and katakana. And this is because a lot of the quiz games that you play in Duolingo, especially in lower levels, are like more of matching patterns more than actually reading.
なんかわかるわ。なんかそういうさ、なんかまあ言語学習に限ったことじゃないけど、なんか普通のなんだ、まあ学校とかの勉強でもさ、なんかマルティプルクエスチョンだとさ、なんていうの、選択肢がいっぱいあるとさ、その問題答えられるけど、なんか記述だとわかんないみたいな。言われればわかるけど、なんか自分からアウトプットできないよっていう感じだよね。
Yeah.
そう。
But not even output. In this case, you can't even
なんか字で
read.
なんか
You're not actually looking at the characters.
字のパターンしか認識してなくて、なんかそのなんて言うんだろう、その言葉の実際の意味とか、その言葉がどうやって使われてるのかの理解が深まってないんだよね。ただこれはこうだからこれはこう読むみたいな、表面上でなんか認識してるだけな気がする。
Yeah, 100%. And I feel the other portion of Duolingo, and it comes with its biggest strength. I think its biggest strength is that it allows people to start learning languages, which I think is great, and it gives people consistently doing it. There's so many people every time I'm like, they start using Duolingo, they'll be extremely consistent because the app harasses you, and it's kind of a meme with the bird harassing you. But I will mention that if for some reason somebody breaks their streak, I've known multiple people who stopped learning Japanese the second their Duolingo streak stopped, because all of their want to continue literally died and was tied to Duolingo. And that was actually one of my biggest criticism is it brings you in, but then traps you in a level that you can't do much with, honestly. And then makes you never feel like you want to leave, or it feels like if you're doing something else, it'll be easier, it's maybe perceived as more harder or less familiar, as being more difficult, and you don't want to engage with it. And that's one trouble I've had with a lot of students, is converting them off of Duolingo, just because I'm like, hey, you're already above this level. You can interact with actual Japanese material here. You can do listen, you'll get way much from it. You get way more from doing so. But its addicting nature, which is its biggest plus side, it's also its largest downside. I will say that, you're checking out Esperanto?
そう、なんか面白いのが、そのデュオリンゴってどれぐらいのまあラングエージをまあ勉強できるのかをなんかウィキペディアで調べたら、ウィキでね、そしたらさ、結構まあ対応してて、まあこれ全部は言わないけど、なんか面白いの発見して、なんかエスペラント語、クリンゴン語って多分あれだよね、スター・ウォーズのやつだよね。あと、コーチ・バリリアン語っていうのが、ゲーム・オブ・トローンズの言葉もうなんか、デュオリンゴでできるらしくて。で、 ね、なんかすごい、だから多分、なんて言うんだろう。その言葉がどういう感じで、なんて言うんだろう。話されてるのかとか、なんか、ちょっとした単語を知りたいっていう人たちは、ジョーリンゴいいんじゃない？例えば旅行とかで、なんか単語をちょっとは知ってたいなみたいな。いう人にとっては、デュオリンゴをやって、まあ、損はしないっていうか、まあ、いい感じのレベルにはなるんじゃない？旅行者にとっては。けど、なんかそのハビーとして、まあ、言語やってる人たちは、ちょっと物足りないっていうか、もっといいものあるよって感じ。
I wouldn't even recommend. I mean, ideally, I feel like I'm just gonna speak for Japanese Duolingo. I feel like if you're using Duolingo for anything other than the hiragana and katakana learning, there are just way many better options. It's just in terms of time in even very similar things. There's many, like if you're trying to develop a vocabulary base. I talked about there's something called Delphin, which I recommended in like the anime video I did, which was way better at just doing that if that's what you want to do. But I feel like what Duolingo serves as the strongest point, and this is what I would say if you are using one of these apps, is I would recommend you, if you still want to keep using Duolingo, do it, but use it as a support tool, not as your main interaction tool. And one of the things that I found, and I will actually make this criticism too to Anki and spaced repetition apps as well, is they're great when you're obviously using them, I'd say, like properly, which is one, I'll define properly as you're keeping it like the main goal should always be, in my opinion, that any app you're doing should reduce time from things that are annoying and cumbersome, that are not language learning. So for example, making flashcards, reviewing flashcards, looking up grammar, looking at vocab. If all your apps are reducing the amount of time you spend doing that, you're doing it correctly. But if you're doing, like, I feel like with spaced repetition or sometimes Duolingo, where your app is offsetting and replacing time you would otherwise be spending listening and reading to whatever language you're learning, in my opinion, you are using that app incorrectly, or you're using it to trick yourself to feel like you're learning, or you're doing it because you think it's easier, whatever the reason may be, and that's fine. You can do that. I just think that's like really bad, like just not productive. Especially like, and spaced repetition apps are really good at this because you start, especially if you're like a more neurotic type of person, you start to feel like that learning the language is the spaced repetition, where really the spaced repetition is best at priming you for recognizing terms and words, and then actually reading and listening to, and getting a lot of input is what helps you determine the nuance of how words are used, how speech patterns, and all of that. And I definitely have met people on the other end where, the hyper, probably one of these people who'd be on the Moe, whatever was it, the Moe Way subreddit that Shockox, or one of our frequent listeners, is on, or something, where they're so into optimizing Japanese, it's all they think about. Like, well, no, anytime I spend doing this, I could just be downloading an Anki deck, and I could be doing, and you're spending 4 hours or something on Anki a day. I'm like, dude, spend that time reading, you'll get way more from it. Like, trust me. But do you have you ever met any, I guess, the Japanese people using apps? Because not you, but are Anki? Because I know that's kind of like more like, in my opinion, I only hear from Japanese learners who are using all these techie equipment.
いや、暗記は周りで暗記使ってる人は大体メススチューデンツ、私がメススクールにいるからさ、メススチューデンツにとっては、日本ではあんまり使ってる人はなんかもう本当にちらほら数人しか多分いないと思うんだけど、私の学校だよね、多分。でもなんかアメリカに行くともうほぼほぼ使ってんじゃない？暗記は。しかもなんかその残記っていうなんかその暗記のなんかそのメディカルノレッジが全部詰まったデックがあって、それをみんな使ってるみたいな感じなんだよね。だからこのその暗記の使い方っていうのも、そのアメリカのメッドスチューデン友達のねになんか紹介されて、暗記使ってないのみたいな言われて、じゃあ使ってみるかって思って、で使ってみて、でちょっとしたらその友達から暗記って日本語だったんだみたいな、暗記っていう単語自体がto memorize かin Japanese でその暗記っていうのが日本語だって知らないぐらい、そのメドスチューデンツはそのなんだメドスクールのために使ってるんだよね。その not for language learning じゃなくて。
Yeah, as far as I remember, even the whole idea of having spaced repetition comes from it starts some H, some guy who basically was learning Japanese using a calendar, and he would write like what he'd review words one day, and then he'd write late. If he didn't know the word that well, he'd write in a physical calendar, oh, I'm going to review this word in this day. And then if he did know it, then he'd put it way further end. And then this literally evolved into a computer science. And so basically a lot of language tech has all surrounded around how hard Japanese is and how I think neurotic and like how many computer science people, including myself, tend to be into Japanese, which is very funny because for other languages, the amount of resources you have, like I've there's been times where I've been trying to help some people out with Spanish, and I'm like, bro, I just can't find any, even for English resources. English, you'd think there's so many people all around the world, that trying to learn English. No, Japanese like wipes the floor with any other language in terms of the amount of resources you have
でもさ、だってどう
available.
考えてもさ、English learners はさ、一番世界で多いじゃん。なのに、
We have all the neurotic, the king, the what's it called? The what is it? The fixation, the neurotic fixation. It's like the people, hyper obsessed individuals who, especially a lot of coders too. And I feel like, yeah, well, I mean, definitely that's like a lot of the most popular apps that are used, whether it be like Anki, or I believe Anki was like an individual or small group project originally, and then like now has different teams. But Yomi-tan or Yomi-chan, which is on the same. A lot of they're all individual ones. Akebi, my favorite like app, a Japanese app. All just individual dudes are like, man, I'm trying to learn Japanese. If I can make something to make it better, I do want to get before actually we hit language exchange apps. I want to talk about AI and apps, and I feel like there's a trend with people. And I'm just assuming it's just businesses from people who've never learned a language, or like they're trying to tech solve a problem that doesn't need solving. But I remember that I saw this Japanese ad that came to me recently that was saying something along the lines of, he's like, oh, I know a lot of words in English, but every day I encounter so many words I don't know. And then it's like, look, we have this new solution. Choose a, what's it called? Like, let us install your preferences or something, look at your phone or data, or like choose terms that are familiar to you, or with topics that you like. We'll evaluate you, and then AI will give you a bank of words to focus and learn. And my response to that is, maybe, for med school, I think it's perfectly valid, because a big part of med school is just rote memorization. It just, this is the correct answer. You're going to expect to fill the box. You memorize this, it's going to be immediately beneficial, right? For language learning, it's not like that. Your goal with all the words is this vague sense of acquisition, this vague sense of knowing all the different use cases, how it's using, how you pronounce it, like, all of that. And that is through, you acquire that nuance through actually exposure. With for medical school, you just memorize the term.
ニュアンスってやっぱ大事だよね。なんか、ラングエージって本当にニュアンスでできてると思う。ね、だって同じ単語でもさ、使われ方で全然全く違う意味、もう本当に真逆の意味で使ってたりさ、皮肉とか、なんか AI がマジで、なんていうの？
It still sucks with Japanese. Let me be clear. AI, deep learn, they still are so unnatural Japanese. It blows my mind. Like, yeah, I mean they are. Like, it's just bad. I don't even know. Well, even actually, I don't want to spoil anything actually. I'm just gonna leave it.
AI が人間を超えれないなんか領域っていうのが、なんかコメディとか皮肉っていうのは絶対 AI がなんていうんだろう、人間をサーパスできない的なことは言ってて、確かになんか AI が皮肉を理解できないのはわかるって感じかな。だってね、だからさ、やっぱニュアンスとかもなんかそっから来るじゃん。皮肉ってニュアンスじゃん。だから言語違う、なんていうんだ、英語はAI 結構いいらしいね。なんか
Yeah, for English.
そうなんか
English is what's called like a low context language, which is like all the information you need to understand the language is in the script, pretty much. But for Japanese, it's high context. So most sentences make absolutely no sense if we're being real in Japanese, and your brain is doing a bunch of work to figure out how they work. Like one of my favorite examples in formal Japanese is when they say "shite itadakereba to omoimasu," where basically you're saying, if you could, I'd think. Literally, that's what it means. It's like, if you could, I would think. But it actually means, if you would do X, I would be happy, and so you should do X. But no, anyways, what I wanted to finish my thought about, because I do think eventually AI will, I'm kind of a tech doomer at this point. In that I'm not really optimistic about anybody having jobs and stuff. But whatever. My
もう一つ行きたい。
Oh, go ahead.
なんか昨日か一昨日になんか起こった面白い話なんだけど、なんか my mom がなんだっけな、バンクのキャッシュカードかなんかでなんか不正に使われてますよっていうなんかメールが来たのね。でそれを私に送ってきて、でこれ大丈夫なのかなみたいな送ってきたのね。で私が見たらなんか明らかに日本語がちょっと変なのね。でなんだっけな、あなたのカードが不正に使われてますよって書いてあって、で、
ご理解のほどどうも
ご理解とご協力どうもありがとうございますみたいな、なんかちょっと違和感あるんだよねどうもありがとうございますっていうご理解とご協力の後使うのかなみたいな。でなんか日本語ってさ、そういうなんていうの、ちょっと違うニュアンスのなんていうのものが入った時点で、この人ネイティブじゃないなとか、このメールなんていうんだろう、スパムとかねっていうかね、すぐわかるから、そこはなんかすごい日本語のいいところっていうか、なんかね、便利なところだと思う。
Well, I think one problem with almost all translation that I think is actually an unsolvable problem, other than like getting people to culturally understand, is there's a huge ways of thinking in different languages about how you would present something. So in English, I might send a message saying, "Hey, prof, if you're casual, like missed the assignment or something, like peace." But in Japanese, or a pretty good example, you're saying Happy New Year's or something, or hope you're doing well. But in Japanese, the way you'd actually do that properly and formally, if you're really trying to be, is the first thing you'd say is you'd comment on the weather. You'd say, it's been hot recently. Do you know what I'm talking about? Or, the spring leaves are falling. I hope there's a whole thing. You have to talk about the weather. Then you have to like doing a leading question. And then if you're saying, oh, let the translator doing that. Well, at that point, you don't even know what you're communicating. Like you send like sup. And then the Japanese is, what a beautiful morning. The dew falls off the leaves. How is it going today? But I definitely think we're not quite there yet with some of the translation. I do want to finish my point that I was making about the AI apps though. And the thing is that I found so funny is, if you're at the point where you have a large vocab, and if this is you, then I listen carefully here, because please don't be tricked by these AI apps. And you see this app that's like, you can put in your preferences, and it'll give you all the words to memorize, so that you can learn the stuff that you're interested in. My recommendation to you is, so the thing about language is it's being used by people who speak the language and use the language to communicate. That's a fun fact there. And the thing about people who speak languages is they create content in the language. So if you're interested in like medicine or, I don't know, sci-fi or whatever the topic is, instead of artificially going and putting in your preferences and then getting words so that you can understand sci-fi, you can also just read the thing or listen to the thing you're interested in and pick up those words through the content. And you're going to remember them better because you're hopefully actually also interested in it. So I just felt like that was like the solution to a non-problem I've ever seen. It's like, are you advanced an English speaker, but for some reason, although you like watching sci-fi shows, you don't want to watch one? Well, then you can learn all the terms for the sci-fi without watching things that you presumably like. And so, I don't know if you've seen those. Have you gotten? I feel like day after day I get these AI Japanese.
もう毎回なんか YouTube の広告で出てくるから、そのエルサっていうのもさ、その YouTube の広告とかいろんなところで広告が出ていて、多分私がそのラングエージのコンテンツを見てるからかわかんないけど、それのアルゴリズムで何かしら出てきて、でいつもエルサっつってDo you want to improve your pronunciation? みたいな感じで、しかも日本語じゃない、日本人がだからその発音を矯正したい人になんかおすすめみたいなでなんかやってて、そう出てくるっていう。
Yeah. Oh, and the last thing I want to mention is language exchange apps. Awesome. Heavily recommend them if you are especially intermediate, advanced, or like late beginner, and you're not what I would call hyper-neurotic about having perfect pronunciation. Then I totally recommend, because I feel like just not that many people use them. I don't see as much talk about them, especially like for people like me who live in rural, middle of nowhere, wherever. And you haven't seen a Japanese person, or a Japanese person hasn't stepped foot on the country you're in, or the locality in the last 100 years, then I highly recommend using language exchange app. Hello Talk you mentioned, but I mean we're not sponsored by anything. And I think a lot of the apps in terms of at my CS head, which is like very critical about stuff like that. But generally speaking, I believe it's worth the trade-off, and it's free. You can speak one language, they speak another. You can meet a lot of different types of people. Obviously, the type of people you're meeting are a very specific type of person who are the ones who are wanting to learn English enough that they go on an app. But definitely, if you're I hope, I don't know, if there's any listeners right now who are listening to this podcast who use Duolingo, send us an email. I want to know how you use Duolingo, and what you think about Duolingo with Japanese. That's the one language I've never heard. I've heard for some languages, there's Evan Edinger for like German, that he swears, but I know he doesn't swear by it 100%. He uses other resources, but he likes using it as a tool, and he found it beneficial as a support tool, which I think is the strongest thing Duolingo can be. But for Japanese, I've never heard anybody nope. For Japanese, I recommend Duolingo. You should do it. And I passed the N1 with Duolingo. I've never seen that video. But yeah, let us know. Duolingo users. 戻りました。
Way back.
lazyfluency は大丈夫です。自信がありましたが、みんなは大丈夫です。それを前に報告しないといけないと思った。また大丈夫じゃないところはたくさんあると思うんだけど、今ニュースを見てるんだけど、その前、多分4日前かな、起こった地震があったんだけど、今録音してる動画の撮影やってる時にも、石川県にももう一つの地震があったらしい。それは今日ですだね。今7日、そう、今日、またその地震だけじゃなくて、津波もあった。で、津波はどこでしたっけ？左の方。なんか日本で石川だけじゃなくて他のいろんな県は影響を受けたでしょ。まだニュース読んでない。そう、あゆみの、他の伝えたいニュースは、あゆみはついにこの総合試験でしたっけ？総合試験終わったから、このニュースについて何も言わなかったんだけど。
Yeah, it's just so like I'm so embarrassed. Like I don't know like any like news about like Ishikawa. So I'm so sorry because like I had this big exam on the 5th and it's over now. But like
それは一応おめでとう。
Yeah. So I couldn't have 年末年始 break.
Beginning and end of a year break ってこと？
Yeah. But like I remember like we had New Year's Day. On New Year's Day we had like a big earthquake. The how do you say like 震源地って how do you say?
Epicenter?
Epicenter? Yeah. Was Ishikawa, so that the area, and then they also had tsunami, which was like about 1.5 meters high. Yeah, if I remember right. And then I remember like I got this notification from my phone, like alert, saying like earthquake, something.
海岸から離れてください。
Yeah, and then when I turned on the TV at my house, the news reporter was like yelling like stay out of
石川の人
yeah stay out of the 海
中傷せずに躊躇
せずに yeah
躊躇せずに逃げください離れてくださいそう
and then more like みんな逃げろ逃げて
そんなこと言ったの
yeah so I was like but like it depends on the TV like channel but like one of the channels reporters was like 逃げて like almost yelling to
タメ語的にどういう
yeah
どういう
it was like I could it was like so she said like remember 2011 のそう福島のMarch 11th の福島のねbig earthquake and then yeah just like don't go to near the ocean yeah that was big
そう、正月の日に、一人の人は亡くなったんだけど、それ以外は大丈夫だったと思う。でも、今日起こってる地震に関しては、今の時点で126人の死者が出て、ね、また不明の人は222人になってるから、これをもうまた石川県、非常に大変な状況だと思うけど、ライブでニュースを今読んでるから、これからどうなるかどうかわからないけど、その日本に住んでない人とか、日本の状況についてあまり知らない人、日本では毎日地震は起こっている。なんかどこでも、どこにも。
Pretty small, like even you can't even like sense the earth the earth is shaking, but like counting those like small earthquakes, it can be like I don't know more than 10 times a day or something.
日本では1から8かな。その地震の震源度でしたっけ？なんていうの？震度？そう、震度があって、1は
1から7強だったっけ？
アメリカの場合だと1から9だと思う。でも日本の場合だと1から8かな。7？ 今調べてる。
1から7強だった気がする。多
分。今調べてます。
7以上もないんだよ。
7から？
じゃあ7以上もない。
7まで。それは結構やばい。アメリカの場合、そう。じゃあ、
7までか。
まあ、私、読むか、読みたいかわかんない。0。まずは、0。震度0。人は揺れを感じない。で、1。震度1。屋内で静かにしている人の中には、揺れをわずかに感じる人がいる。で、少しだけ感じるのは1から始まる。2は震度2。屋内で静かにしている人の大半が揺れを感じる。みんなはある程度揺れを感じる。は2。3は震度3。屋内にいる人のほとんどが揺れを感じる。So, level 3、震度3はほとんどみんなは感じる。震度4、ほとんどの人が驚く。電灯などの吊り下げ物は大きく揺れる。Anything on a 物何でしたっけ？ Anything swinging, anything suspended?
Chandelier とか。
will move a lot or be shaken a lot. 座りの悪い置物が倒れることがある。So things that aren't well planted on the floor will begin to fall over. 震度5、5弱。そう5に入ると5弱、5強かな。So light 5, strong 5、震度5弱。大半の人が恐怖を覚え、物に捕まりたいと感じる。You'll start to develop fear and want to hold on to surroundings. 棚にある食器類や本が落ちることがある。Books will start to fall off at level light 5. 固定していない家具が移動することがあり、不安定なものは倒れることがある。Everything will start falling basically from your shelves. じゃあ、I mean, I think this is relevant for days, and you guys will find it interesting, so my apologies if you're not interested in learning the Japanese Jishin thing, but this will put into context what's currently happening. So, 震度5強。物に捕まらないとあることが難しい。棚にある食器類や本で落ちるものが多くなる。固定していない家具が倒れることがある。これ、補強されていないブロック塀が崩れることがある。So if you have concrete fences, or like, what are they called? Like when you're stacking like a fence made up of bricks, those will even start to break at a 5. And 今日の地震の震度はどれでした？1か2だった気がする。いや、そのやばいやつ。今日起こった地震があったでしょ。
No, it wasn't Q. It was like yesterday.
Oh, yesterday. で、6.7 でしたっけ？書いてあったのはさっき。
Magnitude.
そう。
But like, 震度and magnitude are different things.
In English? or 日本語ってこと？
日本語で。
で、これはそのやばさのってこと？
So magnitude, I'm not pretty sure.
英語では大体同じ。There's like the metric of evaluating how やばい any given 地震 is.
I'm gonna explain in Japanese. Like magnitude は地震そのものの大きさを表すけど、震度はある大きさの地震が起きた時の私たちが生活している場所での揺れの強さのことを表します。
そう、それについて話してる。 で、昨日の震度はどれぐらいだった？書いてある？
昨
石
日、
川、みんながわかるため、どれぐらいやばかったか。石川、今日は地震の話。
like just one.
200なんとか
Just one.
人の人は 1？ いやいや、そのやばい、みんなは死んでる、亡くなってる地震があったでしょ？
No, like the amount だって、total だって。
total？
Yeah.
でもすごく大きな地震がなかったってこと？その
like
1.5
5強 was the strongest one. Also, the New Year's Day no one was also 5強.
で、5
And
強
then I
は
remember,
everything's falling off
Yeah.
the table.
I remember the one we had in 2011 was 7, I guess. The Tsunami one,
あ
yeah.
ちなみに、7はどこでしたっけ？この震度の。震度の、ここかな。7は体重性の低い、
耐震性。
耐震性の低い木造建築は、何でしたっけ？建築かな？すみません。そう、建物は、傾くものや倒れるものがさらに多くなる。So at that point, if you're low resistance to, like, or low earthquake resistant, built like wooden constructed buildings, your building will start to collapse. 耐震性の高い、木造建物でも稀に傾くことがある。Also, even those that have or strongly resistant might begin to what is the word? To sway or to tip over. 耐震性の低い鉄筋コンクリート造の建物では倒れるものが多くなる。So even ones, I'm assuming this is with like a concrete base or just made out of concrete entirely. I'm not sure exactly what the engineering standards are for Japanese homes, but even those will start having problems. So that was the 2011年のやつ.
I guess.
And we're back with the final section. And if you've made it to the final section, that means you send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com with a comment, question, language related, and or otherwise. And this week we have 2 comments from our MVP commenters, Oddity and Shockox, about New Year's resolutions. And it's hilarious because they have the exact opposite advice, basically. We'll start with Oddity, and I'll read Shockox's afterwards. And then we'll give you an update on our resolution status. So, resolute to no resolutions. Here, New Year's resolutions are not really a thing. People celebrate a new year and go to parties. In fact, we had a festive rocket barrage exactly at midnight. I mean, it's not funny, but if you don't laugh, what else is there? But that's about it. I'm not a resolutions person. Despite the statistics Joey read, at least for me, the more ritualistic the resolution, the less chance I'll go through with it. I just procrastinate and then suffer the guilt trip from my super ego for having done so. So I'm at a point where I either do things or don't without vowing beforehand. Interesting list, mainly because everything on it, both the American and Japanese, is so self-involved and focused on the preoccupation with the physical self. Well, except for the weird be happier, which smelled of libertarianism to me as well. But maybe some people can just will themselves into happiness if they think about it really hard. What do I know? It's curious none of the resolutions include other people. It's like the world is becoming more solipsistic and people are caving into themselves and their microcosm. And then Shawcox, on the other hand, which could not be any more different, says, operationalize being happy. We approach good feelings, we avoid negative feelings. Unfortunately, it isn't that simple, because that would mean we always feel happy when we do the most easy feeling things and unhappy when faced with any opposition. But that isn't the case. We face opposition and gain happiness, so we need to add reward. I think reward is a slingshot into positive feelings you can only get by approaching negative feelings. You feel better when you finished homework or a long video or a Dark Souls boss, but if you push too hard into the negative, you just hate it. So to operationalize being happy, we need a graph, and then to apply a score to the negative and positive. And then we need to assign points to every action with a negative or positive number, some of which have a negative number to start, and a positive number after a given amount of time. Then once these are organized, we can organize a day around these. We also have to work under time constraints and energy levels, so those probably have a specific cap and can't be subtracted from too much. Or you reach a state of game over. These need to be applied to every action as well. We also need to account for unforeseen circumstances. So we might just add to some environmental cards and dice rolls. And here's where I'm going to stop because I'm slowly turning real life into D&D, but I think we're onto something here. My first recommendation is if real life D&D or gamifying real life is something you're into. Currently, there's an anime, I think second season is airing, which is like Jaku Kyara Tomazaki-kun deshitakke? I can't remember what it is, but I actually thought it was a sleeper anime when it came out the first season. Actually, pretty good. That's kind of the gaming life is what the anime is about. But do you have any thoughts about the hyper rational optimizing Shakaku's approach versus the oddity let it be approach? Which one do you empathize more with?
このオリティは毎年そうなのかな、それとも今ああいう状況があるからなのかな。
She does say that it's not really a thing. New Year's resolutions in
そうなんだ。
Israel.
なんだろう。なんかね、私どちらかというとなんかオリティ、なんか一応その毎年抱負これですとか言うけど、なんかあんまりなんか達成しよう、なんかなんて言うんだろうね。設定はするんだけど、達成したかしてないかを別になんかいちいち評価することもなく、ただ過ぎていく感じなんだよね。なんか多分設定したからにはちゃんとなんか努力して達成しようとすることをね、する必要があるんだろうけど、なんか例えばさ、なんか毎日スモールゴールズとか決めるじゃん。今日ここまでやるとか、今日はこういうことしてこれした後に何時から何をやるとかっていうのを設定してた時期があったんだよ。で、今でもなんか設定するべきなのかなとは考えてるんだけど、でもなんかそういう設定したところで私はなんか絶対になんか達成できないんだよね。なんか書いたところで細かく書きすぎると逆に何時何分から何をやるって言ってそれができなかった時にもうその後の予定が全部崩れるわけじゃん。だからある程度のなんていうの、自由じゃねえ、柔軟性をそのスケジュールに持たせとかないと分単位とかで設定しとくともう何もかもパーになっちゃうからね、その予定が。だからなんだろうね、その人の性格によると思うんだけど、私にとってはあんまり設定しないっていうのがなんか自分に合ってるのかなとか思いつつ、でもやっぱり設定したい方がいいのかなっつって思ってたりする一面もあるから、なんだろう、ちょっと迷走中でございます。
And I'm definitely shockboxing. Last episode, I'm not sure you could tell, but I was in the period of introspection, both on the podcast, but after that podcast, I feel like I did not achieve nearly as much as I wanted to this year, whether it be with like just stuff I wanted to engage with, like Japanese. I want to be reading way more than I am. I enjoy doing it. It's not even like one of those things that was hard for me. And when I do it, I'm like, oh wow, this is really, or like anime, consuming stuff I like, or more specifically, holy cow, I'm like, I'm trying to kick my butt in gear with the main channel. I have a tentative goal, guys, and I'm telling you this only to hold myself more accountable. But at the very least, I'm trying to do a video a month, and the videos I'm trying to do are kind of getting more and more ambitious, which we'll see how this goes. But at the very least, that's my goal. Get mad at me if I don't. That's there. Yeah, and I'm working on finishing the last one as fast as I can, the most recent one. Hopefully you guys will enjoy it when it's done. But so after last week, I got inspired by some of the podcasts that I was listening to specifically. Me, on the other hand, when I make a goal, I can stick to it with, we'll say, neurotic, specific, what do you call it? Like consistency, and whether it be like when I was training for track or for like when I was training.
Destroy you だから、
it has
あんまりなんて言うんだろうね。
Hold up, it doesn't destroy me though. It gives me life. Like if I am choosing to do so and it's me is the one describing the goal, it allows me to be so much productive, and my day, like I also am able to chill way more than I am. Because in my head, when I don't have like a concrete plan for a day, I just sit doing nothing, feel bad at myself, wish I had done this thing, and then I don't engage with my hobbies because I feel like I haven't done anything. But if I have, like, now that I've itemized a certain amount of reading I want to do per day, and like journaling I want to do per day, and the guaranteeing that I'm getting a certain amount of exercise per day, in my head I'm like, oh, boom, 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 checklist off the list. I'm like, boom, now I'm done with this. And what, I have like 4 hours, like now I can edit or do whatever I want. And I feel like already my productivity has skyrocketed while also increasing my free time. So for me, my specific mindset, I'm all about that operationalization. I cannot speak right now. So there we go. You know what I'm talking about. Let us know where you fall in between this. I wonder, Shawcox, if you had any specific goals. You didn't mention any, but if you're operationalizing, there we go, life, then I feel like I'm very curious to see how much in the weeds you are with this thing, that thing, whatever. For me, what I did, I guess what motivated me was I wrote a 5-year plan of where I want to be, or some like a very vague idea, and I worked backward from that like year by year onto this current year, and then I put like yearly goals, and then I have like daily things that I want to make sure I'm doing every day, and then like specific objectives for the week. So that's kind of how I broke it down, which to oddity might sound horrifically terrible, but to me it has been great, and I've been enjoying it. I've had more free time. Everything's been great. But for Ayami, how we doing? What New Year's? Do you feel New Year?
I feel like I want to read, like possibly every day, but like whenever I ちょっとなんで英語喋ってんだ本を開いて読もうとするとなんか眠くなっちゃうんだよねっていう。はい。
Well, I like what I'm reading. That's the thing.
頑張って読めます。
For me, I just have to. I think Shawcox kind of put this as like a, some things feel good, some things feel bad. For me, the things that normally feel bad for people, I just think they feel good. It's just that my head thinks that I should not prioritize them as much as I should. I go, I shouldn't be doing this because I'm behind on editing, and then therefore I can't run, like because I could be editing. Where I think for other people, maybe they think, like for me, the reward is the run, or the reward is, the reading, or I think things that people wouldn't like. But for me, it's like, it's not like they don't like editing. It's just that I'm like, bro, you should have done it. Like, what are you doing? This video should have been done 2 months ago. Like, what are you doing? And so I'm, yeah. Although I do agree with the Dark Souls analogy. Although for me, I go into every game I play by going on the hardest difficulty first, and I spend the first like 2 hours not killing a single thing, and that's how I find enjoyment. So it might be a kink. But yeah, Happy New Year's once again. Yeah, and let us know. Are you gonna be Duolingo? The Duolingo this year? I don't know. That bell means we've reached the end of today's episode. Thanks for joining us, another lazy conversation towards fluency. If you have any language-related questions and are just looking for general advice, send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com and we might respond in the next episode. Also, make sure to check out our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. We'd appreciate the support. This has been Joey.
And Ayami.
Signing off. Jane.